Good evening and welcome to TDM Talk Show. Mental health remains a taboo for many in Macau. Recent surveys hint at a high prevalence of depression among locals and migrant workers. The sudden social and economic changes have taken a toll on family life and are impacting teenagers' mental health. Our guest has been committed to raising awareness on these matters. Elvo Sou is the president of the Macau Psychology Association's Supervisory Committee. Elvo Sou, thank you very much for joining us and welcome to the TDM Talk Show.
Well, thank you for inviting us.
Let's start by talking about a recent event, a traumatic event, which was Typhoon Hato. This leads me to the question of coping with natural disasters. Many local residents were emotionally distressed. A number of them lost their loved ones. This had a huge impact. What's your take on the follow-up counseling of these people affected by Typhoon Hato?
Yeah, the Typhoon Hato was indeed a traumatic event for Macau, the whole society. Nobody was spared, basically. So it was indeed a big impact. And now we are coming to the almost like 2 months after the event. And I think in the very first month, a lot of things have been done. For example, a lot of the psychoeducation, teaching people how to calm down themselves, how to take care of each other. So a lot of those work have been done. And now we are entering into a phase where some of the people, they might develop some symptoms as a result of the trauma. Now, earlier we had a conversation with TDM before. A lot of the symptoms, the reactions were normal reaction, right? They usually subside in a few weeks. But some people might develop what we call post-traumatic stress disorders. Basically, those are symptoms that affect their social functioning. They have symptoms of reliving the event, trying to avoid it, and also other kind of emotional disturbance. So those are symptoms that we need to watch out for and seek help for it.
Have you been involved in this or your association?
For the work of Macau Psychology Association, we were more involved in the initial phase. For example, 1 week after the Typhoon Hato, we organized a training to the social workers as well as the therapists, counselors in Macau, how to properly do psychoeducation and crisis management for people in their work. Right, so about 600 of them attended the training. So it was a very good turnout. It shows that the professional community was really trying to do something. And of course, each of us have our own field of influence, right? At our work, in our community. So we were hoping that with that training, people would be equipped with the skills and also knowledge to help with the initial phase of the recovery.
Now, looking at the other side, which is like people affected by these traumatic events and natural disasters, do you feel that they're willing to seek help? I mean, are they aware? Perhaps they're not even aware that they need to look for assistance, right?
Yeah, so that's why it is also very important that the community as a whole know about what it is, right? So, for example, I might not have the problem, right? But if you are my good friend, and I notice that something is going on, I will be able to lend a helping hand and then refer you to the professional. Another very important channel would be the medical doctors. For example, their family doctors, right? People, a lot of them, they might experience what we call physical symptoms. Headache, insomnia, very tense, being very edgy, cannot calm down, right? They might not notice that that is actually an emotional disturbance or a result of the psychological reactions to the traumatic event. But if our medical doctors, they are more aware of this, and then they can provide better treatment and also better referral to the appropriate services.
So when we're talking about awareness, it's pretty much all across the board, like community level, the grassroots level, so to say.
Right.
But professionals level, including medical doctors who might not be so aware or so much into identifying these kind of signals that may trigger something else, right?
Well, I think in their medical training, they know about it, but you know, for a situation like this, it's never really happened in Macau, right? So this kind of a reaction, they might see an increase of it. Normally, they may not have any association with a trauma, right? They might treat it as a regular physical symptoms. But now, if they have a better awareness about this, you know, they can do a better service. And at the same time, as you mentioned, the awareness is across the board, right? Individual level, the school level, the community level, the employers level, and also medical level. I think we need to join in all efforts.
Now, this leads me to a wider question, which regards mental health as a taboo. For instance, in Macau. How to break that taboo, and have we made any, have we taken steps in that direction? How do you see the discussion and the willingness of the people to talk about it?
Yeah, well, when we talk about taboo, basically it's a universal situation. It's a matter of the degree, right? And even at the very advanced society, they still have it. You know, it's not like they don't have it. And looking back in Macau, I must say, over the past 15 years that I have been practicing counseling in Macau, I've seen quite a bit of improvement. I still remember, you know, 15 years ago, people totally avoided. You know, there were no people doing private practice, and it's really a taboo. You know, they do not seek help. But in these recent years, we have seen quite a few changes. For example, even though the Macau Psychology Association, we do not really provide direct service, but from time to time, we receive phone calls asking, you know, where should I seek help? Okay, so I think people are getting more aware of this situation and more willing to seek help, but sometimes there may be a mismatch about the access to treatment and facilities, and also to the information that the population may need to know. But I agree with you, you know, taboo is still a thing that we need to continue to work on.
Which is closely connected with social stigma, right?
Yes.
Is still the case.
Yeah, social stigma, according to the research, it is still the most deterrent effect, you know, that prevents people from seeking help. And I think the society as a whole, we need to work on these social stigma issues together. And I'm very glad that today we have this opportunity because media plays a very important role. Let me quote a couple of examples. You know, from time to time we see headlines, you know, on the newspaper saying that like mentally patient hurt somebody, you know, or maybe like the crazy guy, you know, try to burn the subway. Okay, so a lot of the times those catchy
all the stereotypes, right?
Right, all the stereotypes, you know, actually put in a picture to the public that people with mental illness are unpredictable, dangerous, and weak. But those are fine few cases in between. Majority of them actually are victims of crime themselves. You know, they got bullied on, you know, they were the underprivileged, the marginalized persons. So we don't really report that side. We tend to report the dangerous side. So I think we need to work together, you know, to provide a better awareness and understanding.
There's also, and I was referring to some surveys at the very onset of our conversation. A recent study has shown that the estimated number of the Chinese population in Macau that suffer from depression is between 23,000 and 36,000, accounting for 8% of the Macau SAR's population. This survey is a very recent one.
Right.
Is it that, I wouldn't use the word serious, but prevalent?
Well, prevalence studies is a area of mental health research. Okay, so across the globe, different countries they do different prevalence studies on different kind of mental illness. And I must say that the prevalence studies in Macau in general are lacking. right? So we really do not know the overall situation.
We don't have a depiction of the situation?
No. So that was really one of the few prevalence studies that have been carried out in Macau. Now, when we talk about science, it's about being able to replicate, right? So you replicate on the same thing, you do the same thing over and over. When you come to the same result, then we know that is the real situation. So that is the first study. And I think if in the future...
Does that sound the alarm somehow?
Well, that does sound alarming. That does sound alarming because that figure shows that we are almost like twice as likely to have that depression, when compared to Hong Kong or maybe China. Yeah, that is an alarming figure.
Did it come as a surprise, or was that the impression that you had?
Well, it's hard to say because depression is something that people do not really talk about yet. Sometimes they may just feel like, oh, I'm just feeling blue. Okay, so they confuse it with feeling blue versus depression. Sometimes you the general sense is hard to say. But what I would like to add on is that the WHO or even a lot of the prevalence study across the board, across different countries, basically the figures show that 1 in every 4 person suffer from one form or another mental illness in their lifetime. So that is not something very unique to Macau. That is something that is very common now.
There's also this study about depression by a research group from the University of Macau, precisely, where you also work, noting that precisely the number of residents suffering from depression corresponded to a larger share of the population than in Hong Kong or the mainland, and also another survey pointing out that the burden of depression among Macau adults is disproportionately affecting women during emergence, adolescence, and old age, and men during middle adulthood. How to, especially when it comes to teenagers, how to act and who can play a role here in lessening the problem?
Yeah, so teenagers, they are certainly a group that we need to pay special attention on, right? Because if we look at suicide rates, teenagers and the elderly, they are the 2 of the subgroups that tend to have suicidal actions or ideations the most. And we could see a lot of recent news from Hong Kong or nearby regions, that the school kids, many of them have a suicidal problem, which often links to depression. So I think we need to have a very comprehensive angle of looking at this problem, because depression or any kind of mental illness or suicide is never a single factor matter. Right? It's a combination of factors. So family matters, the school matters, the society, the stability of the society as a whole matters, how they look at the future of their own future in this society also matters. Yeah, the interpersonal connections that they have with their peers, also play a very important big role. So all these factors we need to consider and have to take measures together.
Well, talking about measures and the different players here, of course, at the community level, schools, NGOs, the government.
Yeah.
How to put all this together, combined in a way that will effectively tackle the problem?
Yeah, that is a very big question. I mean, most countries are actually battling with the very same question. I would think of a few things. I think there's always one part that goes down to the individual level. We always need to start with that. We need to be responsible for our own life, responsible for our own wellness, and responsible for the people around us, our family, because that is the most important social unit in our society, right? So family is very important. And I must say that in the past 15 years or something in Macau, the family dynamics and the family units in Macau have changed quite a bit, right?
Huge transformation because of the economy, the society, and all
Yeah,
this.
yeah. We see a lot of both parents working, and often in shift, and and then the kids are in the hands of the grandparents or maybe the helpers, right? And we used to have a large group of siblings. Now I could be the only child in the family, so the whole family dynamics has changed. Okay, that's one thing. At the same time, you know, the kind of interaction between kids. We used to be able to play with the next door kid very easily, but we don't do that anymore, right? We connect with each other online, and then there's another virtual world that doesn't really help too much with our mental health. So I think as the family unit, we do, as parents, we need to pay special care to our kids, and then be more attentive to their emotions and their needs. So that is, I would say, the most fundamental one. But of course, our family are also part of the society, right? But they also need other kind of support. So school matters. The kind of social competence that the school would allow children to develop.
Do we have enough psychologists at schools to lend a helping hand and provide counseling services?
Well, we basically now the Education Bureau, they have school counselors in each school. You know, they have certain ratios, and they provide a kind of a support, and at the very I would say the frontline support, okay, to the children. And of course, we can always do better, okay, in several ways. Number one is that I would say, well, I may be jumping to another topic, which I also think is very important. Mm-hmm. In Macau, we know that the social workers are going to get their registration, right, very soon. You know, they're going to the legislative assembly.
What about an accreditation scheme for
and then
counselors?
Yeah, and then with the Health Bureau, okay, they also have the accreditation for the psychotherapists, right? But according to their figures, they are only like 30 plus.
Oh, 30 plus. Already increased to 30.
Yeah, 30 something, okay, in private practice, all right? And then including those who are working inside the government that they do not really like carry that accreditation, then we are talking about 50, okay? And those are far and few in between, right? The community as a whole need a larger mental health workforce, right? But this group of people who are working in the school that I mentioned about, okay, or working in the community that I mentioned about, where is their accreditation coming from? You know, if they are not social workers, or if they are not working the field of the health.
So there's a need for a specific accreditation mechanism for counselors working at schools and at NGOs.
Yes. Because that accreditation, number one, you ensure that only the qualified people enter the field. Number two, you ensure that they continuously develop. Number three, which I think is perhaps the most important, you ensure that they follow ethical guidelines in providing their services. So basically, we make sure that they provide good service to the society. I'm not saying that, you know, the current service is bad, but, you know, we need a structure, okay? We need a system to ensure that things are in place.
You were mentioning and you're hinting at the scarcity of psychotherapists, for instance, and mental health professionals at large. How to tackle this? Do we need to import more professionals in this field coming from Hong Kong, mainland China, elsewhere in the world? What's your take on this debate?
Yeah, this is a very difficult one. I think when we talk about doing therapy, that has a lot to do with the indigenous culture that we live in here, right? If you do not understand the culture here, sometimes your conversation doesn't get across, right? So I think what is more important is that
nurture local talents in this field, right?
Exactly.
But it will take time, right?
It will take time. It will take time, but I think it's a worthwhile investment to do. For example, could we have a more vigorous clinical psychology program to be done in Macau? Okay, we used to, but we don't anymore. All right. So I think we need like mechanisms like that to grow our local talents.
And you were, like, for instance, pointing out that we would need more clinical psychology therapy programs. Can we retrain some of the existing mental health manpower to fine-tune their skills so they can better provide the services? Is it also a way to tackle this?
Well, you know, the professional development is something that in our field is always very important. You know, I myself would engage a professional development, you know, after this interview tonight. So that is something very important for all working here. But what I was trying to address is that, like, within the field of mental health, you have people who are more serious, right? So you need psychiatric treatment, you need more in-depth therapy, right? So that is the clinical psychology, those are the psychotherapists that I mentioned about, you know, within the health system. But a lot of the everyday people, you know, they are struggling with stress, they are having interpersonal conflicts, not sure how to solve, everyday kind of pressure, right? It's not necessarily like to that degree, right? So the counseling professionals in the community, in the school, okay, if we can ensure that there's a very good career mechanism, prospect, registration system, I think they can be a very important and vital force in ensuring the overall mental health in Macau.
What about undergraduate programs, postgraduate programs? Do we need a boost in this respect?
This is something very funny too. With a lot of programs, okay, you are basically trained to deliver professional service after the bachelor's degree. For example, accounting, you can do that, right? A speech therapist, you can do that, right? Physical therapy, you can do that. But when it comes to psychology, our field is somewhat different. Most of our undergraduate program is a introductory kind of program. They do not necessarily gear toward a specific stream. A lot of this specialization within the field of psychology is at the postgraduate level, be it master or even doctoral, right? So in the practical training side, we do expect, you know, people to have gone through a graduate program to be properly equipped with the skills and the knowledge and also the ethical awareness.
Coming back to what the Macau Psychology Association has been doing, your activities and the services you provide, what are the latest activities in this field of raising awareness and channeling perhaps some people to the adequate services?
Well, knowing that the Health Bureau is revising their law on the medical professionals, different kind of professions, right? We have been taking a very active role, okay, in the consultation work, trying to give our advice, you know, what we think would be the best practice. So that's one way of we are helping out. The kind of efforts that the Typhoon Hatto that we talk about, you know, is another kind of work that we do. We also provide workshops, okay, seminars at the request of schools, NGO, okay, to try to help with the education. And we don't necessarily we are not necessarily a service provider, but we have this collaboration with SAF, okay, to provide a psychological service.
Public Administration
yes,
Bureau.
Yes, to provide psychological service for civil servants. Yeah.
Civil servants who are also, we've also received some reports, or I mean, we can see that in the news sometimes because of the stress associated with the civil service these days. And on the other hand, you were also talking about, indirectly talking about the gambling industries in industry, in the sense that the transformation that Macau has gone through has a lot to do with the gaming boom and employment, the kind of employment that we have, where we have both parents working in shifts quite often at casinos. taking this into account, let's say, for instance, the issue of casino staff and family problems related to this situation. Are you looking into this, into the more detail, and what can be done? Could the operators also play a role here, the employers? We're talking about schools, employers. Could they also kind of be more aware and provide some sort of service?
Well, in fact, you know, one good thing about our legislation with the gaming operator is that they are required to provide employee assistance programs to their staff, which I think is a fabulous thing. But we are still facing this taboo issue, this social stigma issue, right? So how to make it more accessible, how to make it more approachable is something that I think it can be done better.
So what about the government? You've been interacting, let's say, with the Health Bureau, with other government departments. Are authorities aware of this problem? Are they willing to do more about it? Or do you encounter any sort of reluctance because of the taboo problem?
Well, I think the taboo doesn't come from the government. The taboo comes from the public, comes from the community. My take is that at the Health Bureau, of course, they have so many things to take care of, right? So one of the things is their mental health. And one thing is that the government actually has this mental health committee, which reports directly to the chief executive. It's something very unique to Macau. You know, even Hong Kong may not have that. Right, so that's one thing, and I have also seen that the Health Bureau, they are making more proactive services. For example, they now provide a counseling service at the health centers in the community. They have launched their psychiatric community team, right? But those new initiatives would take more time for the community to better accept it. But of course, there are always room for better improvement. And I think it still comes down to the level of a workforce that we can provide to the community, and also a career structure for people working in the field.
One final question. Do we need an integrated action plan to tackle mental health issues in Macau?
Yes. That is almost a by default answer,
sure,
right?
Sure.
Right? I think different systems need to work together. As I mentioned, the school, the employers. Let me just put a very simple example. Now, we have been talking about the reform of the labor law, right? And how can we ensure that the employers provide more family-friendly policies? Okay, it is something that is very important to the family unit, right? The kind of very simple, flexible work hours. How many companies in Macau are actually doing that, right? It might be something very simple, but it could have a huge effect or benefits to the family unit. So I think something like that can help, you know, as a society. So the government, the health unit, the employers, the school, the community, we all need to work together.
And with this message related to an ongoing issue, the Labor Relations Act revision, we wrap up our talk. Elvo Sou, thank you very much for joining us. Pleasure to have you on the show. Fascinating talk.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And to you at home, thanks for tuning in. We'll be back next week.